here is something that will change how you think about globalization. The world's first global economy was uncreated by ships or the internet. It was built by caravans of camels carrying silk across deserts, so hostile that entire expeditions vanished without a trace. But here's the mystery historians argued about for decades. Why silk? Why would merchants risk everything, traveling 4,000 miles through bandit-infested mountains and waterless wastelands, just for fabric? The answer reveals something shocking about how trade doesn't just move goods. It fundamentally rewires civilizations, transfers power between empires, and creates dependencies so deep that when the trade stops, entire societies collapse. And the fate of the Silk Road holds a warning for our modern global economy that most people completely miss. To understand the Silk Road, you need to picture the world in 130 BCE. The Roman Empire controlled the Mediterranean. The Han Dynasty ruled China. Between them stretched 4,000 miles of some of the most brutal terrain on Earth. No single empire controlled this middle ground. Now here's what made this situation explosive. Rome was obsessed with silk. Roman senators wore it as a status symbol. But Rome had no idea where silk came from. They thought it grew on trees. Meanwhile, the Chinese guarded the secret of its production like a nuclear code. Revealing how to cultivate silkworms was punishable by death. This information gap created the most profitable trade arbitrage in history. A pound of silk that cost a few coins in China could sell for its weight in gold in Rome, but there was no direct route. Instead, goods passed through a chain of middlemen, each marking up the price. This chain of dependency was about to do something no army or emperor had ever accomplished: connect half the planet into a single economic system. The Silk Road didn't start as a grand vision. It started as a military problem. In 138 BCE, the Han Dynasty faced constant raids from nomadic warriors, the Xiongnu. The emperor sent a diplomat named Zhang Tian west to find allies. The mission was a disaster. He was captured and held for 10 years. When he finally returned to China, he had failed his mission. But he brought back something more valuable than any alliance: information. He had seen the markets of Central Asia, where people were desperate for Chinese goods and willing to pay extraordinary prices. More importantly, he'd mapped a route. The emperor realized this wasn't just about trade. It was about projecting Chinese power. China secured the eastern part of the route, and as merchants moved west, the kingdoms in Central Asia got rich from taxing the trade. They then had a reason to protect the merchants, making the route safer, which drew in even more merchants. Within 50 years, the Silk Road became the economic engine of Asia. By 100 CE, the Silk Road wasn't really about silk anymore. The real trade was in everyday goods: ceramics, spices, horses, jade, glass, and grain. But with the goods came something even more transformative: ideas. Buddhist monks traveled the Silk Road into China, bringing a religion that would reshape East Asia. Chinese inventions like paper and gunpowder diffused west. The Silk Road became an information superhighway. Cities like Samarkand exploded in wealth, becoming cultural fusion reactors where East met West. This diffusion of control made the system resilient. If one kingdom became hostile, merchants could just go around it. But it also created a massive vulnerability. Everyone along the route became completely dependent on the trade continuing. The moment the trade stopped, their economies would collapse. And that breaking point was coming. The Silk Road thrived for over 1,000 years. Then, in the 13th century, the Mongols invaded. At first, this looked like the end. But here's the twist. The Mongol conquest actually supercharged the Silk Road. Under their rule, the entire route from China to Eastern Europe fell under a single empire. Trade exploded. This period, the Pax Mongolica, was the Silk Road's golden age. But it contained the seeds of its own destruction. By connecting east and west so efficiently, the Mongols created a highway not just for silk and spices, but for something microscopic and deadly: the bubonic plague. In 1346, the Black Death began spreading along the Silk Road, killing up to a third of Eurasia's population. Trade collapsed. Cities were abandoned. The merchant networks disintegrated in less than a decade. The psychological foundation of overland trade was broken. Merchants started looking for alternatives, and they found one. After the Black Death, the Silk Road never recovered. It was a slow strangulation. First, the Mongol Empire fragmented, and safe passage vanished. Second, the rise of the Ottoman Empire created a hostile checkpoint between Europe and Asia, charging extortionate fees. But the third factor was the death blow. Maritime technology improved. In 1498, Vasco da Gama reached India by sea, bypassing the entire Silk Road. Suddenly, European merchants had a faster, safer, and cheaper alternative. For the cities of Central Asia, this was an economic apocalypse. They had optimized their entire economies around being middlemen. When the network shifted to the sea, their geographic advantage became irrelevant overnight. They had no plan B. So what's the warning for us today? In 2013, China announced the Belt and Road Initiative, explicitly modeled on the Silk Road, to revive these overland routes. But many projects are economically unviable because sea and air routes are still far more efficient. The deeper parallel is dependency. We've created our own Silk Road-style vulnerabilities. Over 90% of advanced computer chips are made in Taiwan and South Korea. If that supply chain breaks, industries worldwide would collapse. We learned nothing from how the Silk Road cities fell. The shocking truth is that our global supply chains are arguably more fragile today than they were then. Our just-in-time systems have eliminated redundancy for efficiency, making them catastrophically vulnerable to single points of failure. Every civilization believes its trade networks are permanent. History suggests they're wrong. So, are we building a resilient global economy? Or are we building the next Silk Road system, so optimized for today that it's catastrophically fragile to the changes of tomorrow? If this changed how you think about globalization and the hidden risks in our modern world, let me know in the comments. And to understand more about the patterns that predict the collapse of economic systems, make sure you subscribe. Thanks for watching.